going to start a new topic, which is solving literal equations. To solve a literal equation, we're going to use the inverse operation to find a specified variable. Before we get into that, we are going to start by reviewing what does it mean to use the inverse operation. Here we have an equation, and our goal is to solve for x. In order to do that, we need to get rid of the 5 and the minus 2. So we must decide which one first and how. Hopefully you remember from last week that we would first get rid of the minus 2 by adding 2 on both sides, and we'd be left with this. Next, we get rid of the 5, and we have to ask ourselves how, and we should hopefully say that we need to divide by 5 on both sides. After doing both of those things, we'd be left with x equals 2, which is our solution, and we'd be done. We know we're done because we've isolated the variable x, and we've gotten it all alone. That's going to be our goal when we are solving literal equations. We are first going to identify the variable for which we are solving. This is the one that we want to isolate. We're going to use the inverse operation to isolate that variable and get rid of all of the things we do not want. Combining like terms is not usually possible because you're going to be seeing that there are different variables that cannot be combined. And sometimes we will have to add grouping symbols like parentheses if needed to make sure that the order of operations does not change. So what does that look like? Here's an example. M plus A equals P. Now this doesn't really mean anything at all, but it is an equation and it can be solved. We want to solve for M. So the first thing we are going to do is identify the variable we need to solve for. We want to solve for M. That means that we need to get rid of that plus A. So how do we do that? Well, we need to use the inverse operation, and so the opposite would be to subtract A on both sides. So the A's are going to cancel, but what happens is on the right side, P and A are not like terms, so we cannot combine them, so we just write P minus A. M is alone, it's isolated, so this will be our final answer. We have successfully gotten M by itself. Let's try another example. V is equal to L times W times height. Maybe you recognize that that is the formula for volume. We want to solve for W. So our first step, again, is identify what we want to solve for. It's the variable W. So we need to get rid of the L and the H. The little dot means that W is being multiplied by L, so we want to do the inverse of multiplication, which is divide. So we will divide both sides by L to get rid of that on the right side. I notice that it is also being multiplied by H, so I can also divide both sides by H to cancel that out. Once I do that, on the right side, I'll be left with W all alone, which is what we wanted. I can leave my answer like this, but it is more correct to rewrite with the W on the left side of the equation. So we simply rewrite that, and we say that W is equal to V over L times H. And we know we're done because we have isolated the variable W. Let's try a little bit harder example. This time, we are trying to solve for X. So there are two things that we need to cancel. We need to cancel A and B. We have to make the decision of which one to cancel first. It looks like it'd be easier to get rid of plus B by just subtracting B on both sides, so let's try that. When we do that, they will cancel on the left, and we are left with AX is equal to, and if we recall from the first slide, if you cannot combine, then you should just write the statement. So we cannot combine Y and B, I will just write Y minus B. Lastly, we need to get rid of that A. We say, okay, we want to separate it from the X, so we are going to divide both sides by A. That will leave us with X. I notice that on the right, every variable is different, so nothing can be combined. So I'm going to just leave it as is.